Hello, this is Elijah of Buxton, Chapter 6. Mr. Travis cheats us out of a great lesson. It don't seem fair, but since the start of this year, Mr. Travis has been teaching us both our everyday school and our Sabbath school classes. And that means the man is on you like a tick. You can't get away from him no matter where you go. The biggest problem is if he pegs you as being not particular bright in everyday school, you ain't got prayer the first of having a clean slate when Sunday comes round and you got to go to Sabbath school. When Mrs. Guest was our school teacher and Mrs. Needham taught us Sabbath school, you had a better chance of fooling at least one of them into thinking you were sensical. But with Mr. Travis running both schools, you ain't nothing but a dead duck. What's even unfairer is that he mixes regular lessons up with Sabbath lessons so they run one into the other and you can't tell which one is which one. I know that ain't the way it's supposed to be, 'cause if it was, they wouldn't have regular classes at the schoolhouse and Sabbath classes at the church. I ain't trying to be disrespectful of teaching or teachers, but I've had enough classes with Mr. Travis to know that getting taught in a classroom just don't work. Elijah, don't say that. That ain't to say that he can't force you to study something till it sticks in your mind for a while, 'cause he can. But I don't care if you study on something all your life. It ain't gonna stick like if it happened to you personal. Okay, well, I kind of agree to that. Like, I'm not saying you can't learn anything from reading about it or whatever, because obviously I believe in reading. But it is a lot easier to remember something and be an expert on something if you have experienced it. I hear you on that one, Elijah. Ain't nothing made this point better than the lesson Mr. Travis has been pounding on us lately, both in regular classes and Sabbath school. It started out because Cooter Bixby went and sassed Mr. Travis when he didn't know he'd done it and when he didn't mean to do it. I came to school on Monday and Cooter's waiting on me afore the bell runged. He's sitting on the front steps of the school so antsy and twitchety that he looked like he's sitting on a hot stove. Something had him awful riled up and happy. I said, "Morning, Cooter." "Morning, Eli." He jumped off the steps and pulled me over to the side of the schoolhouse so's no one could hear us. Cooter said, "Guess what? I seen Mr. Travis at the sawmill on Saturday." "So?" "And he was acting more peculiar than he normal do." "So?" "And we gets to talking and I seen he's mighty upset about something." "So?" "So the more he talked to me, the more and more upsetter he's getting for no cause at all. So when he finally leave, I'm standing there scratching my head, wondering what's plaguing him." "What you figure it was?" "I couldn't make heads nor tails of it. Sorry, I'm so tired. I couldn't make heads nor tails of it till a minute ago, when I seen him going at the blackboard like a demon had a hold of him. Then I finally knowed what it was." "Cooter, quit playing. What was it?" "He was acting so peculiar 'cause of what he was planning on doing here at school today." What's that?" "Elijah, you ain't gonna believe what Mr. Travis is fixin' to teach us about this morning." I weren't gonna get myself worked up about none of Mr. Travis's lessons. I ain't trying to say I'm smarter than Cooter, but I notice things a little better and carefuller than him. And Mr. Travis ain't showed no signs at all that he could come up with any lesson that was worth getting this excited over. But if there was someone who weren't enthusiastic about his studies more than me, it was Cooter Bixby. So for him to be this riled up, maybe it was going to be something after all. I said, "What's he going to teach us?" Cooter looked over both our shoulders, then whispered, "Take a peek in that window and look what he's writ on the blackboard. You ain't gonna believe it." I stood on my tiptoes and looked into our classroom. Mr. Travis didn't usually write nothing on the board till we'd been studying for a while and children had started getting drowsy and droopy, but today he'd writ across the blackboard in letters big enough that you could have read 'em from Lake Erie in the fog. Familiarity breeds contempt. You could tell Mr. Travis was feeling real strong about this lesson. The words were underlined 3 times. And you could even see that he'd been mashing on the chalk so hard that it had busted clean in two in a couple of places, and he had to commence his underlining all over again. It were nothing to imagine Mr. Travis standing at the blackboard after he'd finished doing this writing, huffing and puffing with his eyes spitting fire. Doggone it all, maybe Cooter was right. Familiarity breeds contempt. That means like the more used to something or someone you are, you kind of stop respecting them. That's what that saying means. I don't know why Cooter's all up in arms about it. I weren't too confident that he was going to know, but I asked him anyway. So what do those words mean? Cooter said, "Oh, you don't know? I was kind of hoping you could tell me, but I done some thinking the way Mr. Travis been telling me to. I matched up the 2 of them words I don't know with 2 words that I do know." Oh, Cooter's using a fix-up strategy. He matched up 2 of the words he didn't know with 2 words that he does know, like ones that sound the same. What you come up with? Like I said, I ain't got too much a notion what the first word and last word mean. I figure they ain't nothing but some fancy mumbo jumbo, but we both know what that word in the middle means, right? I must have been looking puzzled. Cooter said, "Eli, you work in the stable. You gotta know what." He checked over my shoulder again, leaned in real close and whispered in my ear, "You just gotta know what breeding is, right?" You didn't need to work in no stable to know what breeding is. I said, "Yeah." Cooter said, "And look at that first word, familiarity. That look a powerful lot like it got something to do with family, don't it?" It does. Cooter said, "And the last word, contempt, it looks just about the same as contest, right?" I guess so. So what's that all sum up to? Okay, this is a fix-up gone wrong. Oh, God. I shook my head. Cooter whispered, "Come on, Eli, put it all together and it come up to family breeding contest." He's going to learn us about having a blanked family breeding contest. No. What else could it mean? Cooter saw I weren't real convinced. He said, "My pa said that Mr. Travis is from New York City and grown up free. And that's 2 reasons what folks should be suspicious about him for. Pa says him and them other grown folks was going to have to keep a sharp eye on what Mr. Travis tried to learn us." I said, "So? Don't you see, Eli? Ain't no grown folks been checking up on Mr. Travis lately. So he thinks the coast is clear and it's safe for him to give us some of that stuff what Pa calls up north big city learning mess." It sounded peculiar at first, but if you started thinking like you didn't have no common sense at all, it seemed like Cooter'd put it all together real good. Cooter saw I was starting to believe and said, "And if family breeding contests don't count as some up north big city learning mess, I don't know what do." I couldn't help myself from saying, "I'll be blanged." That's like their swear word, blanged. Well, I'll be blanged. I know that's swearing, but compared to what our lesson was going to be about, swearing didn't seem like much of a sin no more. Cooter said, "I just wish he hadn't gone and writ the lesson out on the board like that. What if that doggone Emma Collins or one of them other persnickety girls run off and tell someone what we're about to study? What if they stops this before he gets to the real interesting, real nasty parts? By the time the school bell rung, Cooter had me so worked up that I was looking like I was sitting on a hot stove too. We both knowed something big was about to happen, because instead of saying his regular, "Good morning, scholars, strivers, and questers for a better future. Are you ready to learn? Are you ready to grow?" the way he does every other morning, Mr. Travis was sitting at his desk holding on to his pointing stick. His eyes were closed and he was so hopping mad that it was a miracle that smoke weren't pouring from his ears. I knowed why, too. He must have figured out that once he taught us about family breeding contests, the grown folks were going to hunt him down and give him a good tar and feathering. I'd heard lots of talk about such things, but hadn't never witnessed it myself. But I knowed if I ever ran into Mr. Travis again after this, I was going to have to apologize for spreading talk that he was a boring teacher. I was going to have to eat my blanged words, because couldn't nothing in the world make you want to come to school more than learning about a family breeding contest than watching the teacher that taught it to you get covered in hot tar and run out of the settlement on a rail. We all settled down at our desks and waited. Even the children who didn't know what today's lesson was about sensed something wasn't right and started looking at one another, all nervous and worrisome. See, look, you guys are so used to getting sex ed at school, you don't even think it's that interesting anymore. But look at them. They think they're going to learn about a family breeding contest and they're going nuts. Okay. Mr. Travis stood up and me and Cooter were about to bust with excitedness. Mr. Travis brung that pointing stick down on top of his desk so hard it was a miracle the desk didn't split clean in two. All the other children were taking this in a very terrorific way. They were clenching onto the sides of their desks and looking as afeared as a horse that's seen a three-headed snake. Excepting for Mr. Travis's heavy breathing and the pointer sound echoing off the walls, the classroom was quiet as a dead squirrel. Only me and Cooter were smiling, because we both know this was just the start of the best day of schooling we were ever gonna have. I looked over at Cooter and he was looking just as happy as me. Mr. Travis opened his eyes and saw Cooter smiling away, and if I live to be 50 years old, I hope I don't never witness another grown man go berserk like Mr. Travis did. It was a sight and a scar that'll be with me the rest of my life, right along with that trouble twixt me and Mr. Frederick Douglass. The adventure got going so quick like that I ain't sure of everything that happened. But all of a sudden, Mr. Travis was howling like a wolf and jumping clean across the classroom and pouncing on Cooter Bixby like an owl on a rat. He moved so fast that Cooter didn't even have a chance to get the smile off his face before Mr. Travis jerked him out of his chair by the ear and marched him to the front of the room. I was shocked, and I couldn't have moved if I wanted to. Some of the other children weren't in as much shock as me, and soon as Mr. Travis clamped down on Cooter's ear, they made a dash toward the doors. You can't blame 'em neither. Ain't nothing in the world that can get you more frighted up than watching your Sabbath school teacher get took over by Satan and commence twisting the juices out of children's ears. Okay, guys, that he didn't really get taken over by Satan. Okay, Elijah's exaggerating, but let's listen again because it's some pretty good hyperbole. You can't blame him neither. Ain't nothing in the world that can get you more frighted up than watching your Sabbath school teacher get took over by Satan and commence twisting the juices out of children's ears, which is probably the first step the devil takes when he's about to wrestle your soul away from you. Before anyone could reach a door, Mr. Travis called out, "Return to your seats this instant!" Everyone stopped where they were at and commenced heading back to their desks, all except for Johnny Wells, who screamed like a haint had got a hold of him and jumped right out the window. The last I saw him, Johnny was tearing down the road toward the square, raising up little clouds of dust as he ripped along. Once everyone got sitting again, Mr. Travis kept a hold of Cooter's ear and shouted louder than you figured a proper man like him should. Our people are still enslaved and treated like animals. Cooter couldn't tell that Mr. Travis had lost his mind. He was still smiling and nodding, and I knowed why, too. Cooter ain't the sharpest tooth on the saw, and he must have figured that if we were gonna get a family breeding contest lesson, then getting your ear pulled on a little bit weren't too much a price to pay. Like I said, I ain't trying to say I'm smarter than Cooter, but I do study on things a little better and carefuler than he does, and I could see there weren't going to be no kind of lessons on nothing till Mr. Travis was done dusting off Cooter Bixby and dusting him off good. It ain't no real sign that I'm a fragile boy, but now I was sitting like all the other children. My hands were gripping on tight to the side of my desk. My breathing was coming raggedy, and my eyes were locked on Mr. Travis, wondering how long 'twas gonna be afore he got back in his right mind. And if his mind didn't come back to him, I was wondering whose soul he was gonna grab next. Mr. Travis said, "They are treated like animals, and though a very few fortunate ones of us know the sweetness of freedom, unfortunately another very, each time Mr. Travis said very, he gave Cooter's ear a good little twist. Very. Cooter's ear was getting wound up so tight that he started dancing on one leg trying to get some of the pressure off it. But he was still smiling. Very. I couldn't stand it no more. Why, if Mr. Travis kept on twisting Cooter's ear like that, when he did turn it loose, it'd be spinning and unwinding itself on the side of Cooter's head for a whole week. What do you think's going on? I can't even remember. But, like, why is he so mad at Cooter? Cooter saw him at the sawmill. Maybe he did something. But now he's talking about slavery. Like, what does that have to do with Cooter? Cooter's a boy. He said, our people are still enslaved and treated like animals. And though a very few fortunate ones of us know the sweetness of freedom, unfortunately, another very, what does that have to do with Cooter? I didn't care if it drawed attention to me or not. Cooter's my best friend, and I knowed he'd do the same for me. I took in a deep breath to buck up my courage and finally raised my hand and yelled out, Mr. Travis, sir, please forgive me for talking out in class, but I just got to let Cooter know if he don't quit smiling, sir, he's going to end up getting that ear ripped right off from the side of his head. Oh, Elijah, I thought he was going to say to let Cooter go. Cooter heard me through his other ear and capped on to what a bad spot he was in. Finally, he stopped smiling and started in howling. But Mr. Travis gave him a couple of more veries anyway. Very few of us don't have an appreciation of whence we have come. Cooter yelled, I appreciate it. Mr. Travis said, oh, you do? Cooter screamed, oh, sir, you can't know how much I do. Mr. Travis said, and where, may I ask, was your appreciation of that fact this Saturday past at the sawmill? You could tell Cooter didn't have no kind of answer, but something about getting your ear twisted must make your mind work real clear. Cooter said, I'm sorry, I don't know what I done, but I'm powerful sorry, sir. Mr. Travis eased back a notch on Cooter's ear and tells him, read what's on the blackboard, Mr. Bixby. Cooter didn't even look. He called out, it says family breeding contest, sir. He couldn't help but notice the surprised look on Mr. Travis' face, so he decided he'd best add some more. He said, and I don't care what happened, sir. I ain't going to breathe a word to no one if you teaches us about that. But look at them there girls. You know Emma Collins is going to snitch. Mr. Travis commenced twisting on Cooter's ear some more. He told Emma, Miss Collins, read what I've written on that blackboard. Emma jumped up like she sat on a tack and said, sir, it says, familiarity breeds contempt. Sir, Then Emma started in with her bawling. Me and Cooter both were surprised at this. Not about Emma bawling. That girl'll cry if you ask her what's 2 and 2. We were surprised that Emma Collins, being as smart and fragile as she is, would be brave enough to call them words out right in front of everyone. Miss Collins, you may be seated. Mr. Bixby, do you understand what that means? Cooter thought on it for a second and said, Well, sir, I thought I did. But now I'm thinking that maybe Elijah gave me some bad information. I couldn't believe it. Here I'd helped save Cooter's ear, and the first chance he got to throw me to the wolves, he did it. Mr. Travis said, It's quite obvious you have no idea. It means once a person, let's say a person like you, Mr. Travis went back at the ear twisting, once a person feels too comfortable around someone who is his elder or his superior or his teacher. Cooter went back to howling. That person has a tendency to not treat his better with the respect that's due. Cooter got it now. What did I do, sir? I didn't do nothing. Mr. Travis said, That's exactly it, Mr. Bixby. You did nothing. When you met me at the sawmill, you did not remove your hat when you walked up to me and spoke. You did not wait until I was finished talking to Mr. Polite. You did not address me in the proper manner. Cooter said, But sir, I was surprised and happy to see you. I didn't say nothing but, Hey, Mr. Travis. Mr. Travis's mind left him again, and he started winding Cooter's ear back up. That's it. Hey, hey, hey. Now, hey was the word Mr. Travis used every time he gave Cooter's ear a crank. Hey? Last time I checked, Mr. Bixby, hay was for horses, not for one's instructor. I've grown angrier and angrier. You are so fortunate to be freed from the yoke of slavery. You have this wonderful opportunity to improve who you are, and instead you choose to behave toward me in a manner one would expect of a poor, ignorant soul who has lived his entire life in bondage. It was about this time that the door flew open and Mr. Chase came busting in, toting a broadaxe and dragging a screaming, kicking Johnny Wells behind him. Johnny was yelling, Please, sir, don't make me go back in there. He already killed Cooter Bixby. Mr. Chase looked around the classroom, saw Mr. Travis, brung his axe down, then said to Johnny Wells, If you ever drag me out the fields over some nonsense like this again, boy, I'm going to hide you, then give you to your pa so he can do the same. Do you see any haints in here? Do you see anyone what's dead in here? Mr. Chase pulled off his cap and looked back at Mr. Travis twisting and Cooter dancing and said, I give you my regrets for coming in here like this, sir. You can carry on with your lesson. Things got pretty bad after that. We didn't learn nothing about no family breeding contest, and Mr. Travis commenced handing out lines as punishment and licks as reminders. I got 3 swats and had to write familiarity breeds contempt 25 times for speaking out in class and for providing Cooter with bad information on what it meant. Johnny Wells got 5 swats and had to write it 50 times for running off and snitching on the teacher. Cooter got 10 licks and had to write it 125 times for being what Mr. Travis called riddled with disrespect for his superiors. Unfairest of all, since Cooter was my best friend, I knowed I was going to have to help him out, so I'd probably end up writing 50 of his doggone lines myself. I knowed the reason why Mr. Travis went and made us write all them lines and passed out all them swats. It was 'cause he was trying to make the familiarity breeds contempt lesson stick. But classroom learning just don't work the same as when something happens to you personal. That ain't to say that the lesson ain't going to be with me for the rest of my life. But it don't have a thing to do with Mr. Travis, 'cause it weren't but a few days later that the lesson got taught to me in a way that can't help but last forever. The next chapter is called Mr. Leroy Shows How to Really Make a Lesson Stick. That chapter made me a little uncomfortable. First of all, I know in the olden days, like you've been to like the Pioneer Schoolhouse or whatever, they always tell you about how the teachers used like physical punishment. But I don't like it, and everybody knows now, there's tons of studies that it doesn't really work very well. Second, I don't like Cooter's getting punished. And even this is the part that breaks my heart, because Cooter said, "But sir, I was surprised and happy to see you." And he just talked to him the way he, because he was surprised and happy to see him. But Mr. Travis wanted it a different way. But why do you have to punish somebody for that? But it's almost like, it's like, because of the amount of racism, that's why they have all these rules in Buxton. Everything's got to look a certain way, because they're afraid that if it doesn't, the white people will treat them poorly. They have to be extra good and extra polite just to be normal and be left alone. And unfortunately, as we can see nowadays, it can sometimes be like that too, having to be extra polite, or always being judged too quickly, or you're up to no good, and you've seen the things that were happening in the States and even in Toronto. The racism is still around, and it's like this example here. Mr. Travis is so obsessed with them being educated and proper, because of then, they might be treated better in the world, but it's not fair. And he was way too harsh to Cooter, and poor Cooter, he was just being a kid. Anyways, it started off funny, but then it made me feel sad. And that is the end of chapter 6.